Good morning, everyone at Print 13, and welcome to all of you who are viewing our online streaming video. Thanks to Deborah Cord and her alliance partners with the Printerverse, we're able to broadcast live. We've had some great panels this week. Today, we have 3 members of the Market Your Printing Company group. Rock, would you like to come up and join the group? Oh, okay. I tried to talk Rock LaManna, but he is bashful. He is camera shy. We all know that about Rock. So you sit and listen and ask questions. You can be our ringer. So I'm Mary Beth Smith. I'm the founder of Girls Who Print, but I also host a discussion group on LinkedIn called Market Your Printing Company. We have very lively discussions, just really sharing best practices and opinions on how we can up our game and do a better job of marketing ourselves to our customers. Today I have 3 experts with me: Howard Larson of Larson & Associates, Tim Hendricks of Creative Cognition. Thank you, Tim. And Jim Mickelson of VDP Web. Okay, I'll let them tell you a little more about what they do in a few minutes. Now, we've had some great discussions on this panel this week. Monday was particularly lively. We had a lot of passionate thoughts about how sales and marketing differ, or whether they differ at all. So today I'd like to address the question, what's the difference between sales and marketing, from another angle? Where do sales and marketing intersect? How do they work together? So I'd like to start the panel off with that. Howard, you're holding the microphone. Why don't you give us your best shot here?
Well, to me, I'm more of a street salesperson, so that is backed into marketing. And if there was a connection point, marketing is the impetus to feed into the sales the kind of prospects and leads that they are looking for that fit their shop so that they can close them.
I see sales as the front line of an organization. They're the face-to-face relationship building component of an organization, and marketing is sort of the air cover for the sales organization. They create and brand the products and tools that arm the sales force to go out and create solutions for the customers.
Tim, before you hand that off, I want to ask you a question about what you said. How do you see those processes intersecting, though? Where do they work in tandem?
That's a great question. I really believe in voice of the customer, and that marketers should create a customer-focused group, certainly with their best clients, so that they can monitor the direction that customers are going, the changes in media, the changes in technology. How do we evolve with those changes, and how do we create growing and more long-term solutions for those clients? So I see engagement with the customer, both from sales and marketing. Sales may have that frontline relationship, but marketing has to have a handle on the pulse of the customers, so that we can continue to grow and respond to their changing needs.
Jim.
I have always had a different take on this subject completely, in that there is no difference between marketing and sales, because in any organization, it's my opinion that everyone's in sales. I think someone said the other day, your best salesperson is your delivery driver, because they have the most contact with your customer. And when you start segmenting people into roles, I think we lose sight on what our real idea is how are we interacting with the customer, what are their needs, and how are we identifying where they are. Now, salespeople are great, but they only call on the top 2% of their customer list. And how do we get the other 98% engaged? And I think that, because that's the case, your marketing people really do become your front-end sales force, as they're the voice of the company most of the time.
Question for you, Jim. If sales and marketing are essentially the same function, which in many companies they really kind of are, particularly smaller companies. Others, they're more segregated, they're more in silos. How would you see the role of the sales rep playing out in terms of setting direction for how the company develops products, or how they communicate those to the customers, or for long-term strategy? How do you see that?
The larger the organization, the more difficult breaking down those silos becomes. And I used to work for Home Depot, and I can tell you those people didn't talk to each other, ever. I ended up creating a software company because IT wouldn't talk to IS, wouldn't talk to marketing, wouldn't talk to the front retail side, wouldn't talk to the sales force and the outside. You couldn't get anything done. And because everyone has these very specific mandates, it makes interaction almost impossible because the metrics are different. In order to get those people to combine, you have to pay them the same way, and their metrics have to be the same.
I think that's a really strong point. Several years ago, I did an informal poll on LinkedIn asking, do you wear two hats? Are you sales and marketing? If so, how do you handle it? Do you think it's a good idea? The best response that I felt that I got said that ideally sales and marketing work together under a VP of sales and marketing, someone who understands both and can cross-train everyone so that they're working together. And I thought that was an ideal way to describe it.
That's because the bonus system for the VP of sales and marketing encompasses both.
Yes, it
People
does.
will do whatever you pay them and give them bonuses to do.
Very true, and it does require a different comp plan. This is not a question I had planned, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. If you are going to align sales and marketing, how do you adjust the comp plans? If salespeople are used to being paid on commission, meaning they chase transactions, and marketing people are used to being paid to think and forecast and research, how do you adjust the compensation? Any thoughts on that?
I think there's a couple of different venues that kind of play into this. We have different solutions in the marketplace today. You have some that are going to be more immediate sales. You can obtain a quotation and put something on press next week. You could go in and conduct a needs analysis with a client for a workflow solution that might not sell for 6 to 8 months. So when you look at a commission plan, it really doesn't motivate that rep who has to get some type of income in the current month when they want to work on a longer term overall solution. So I think there has to be a blend, and I look at the sales mix today as a kind of focus and fit effort with an organization. I say focus and fit because if you kind of look at the sales mix in terms of a triangle, you've got that easy access business that you can obtain at the bottom of the triangle. It may be quicker turn, it may be lower profitability, but it's going to keep you running in the current month. But then you want to get yourself up into the top of that triangle with more complicated, more innovative solutions, which is a longer sell. So you end up creating some type of a compensation structure and or a different type of sales organization where you're going to have people that are selling in a more specialized way the solution sale who might be more salaried with an override or budget so that they can survive that 6 to 8 month period. But you still need to feed that initial need, and those could be your commission reps who are going to sell in a more transactional environment.
So you think kind of having a mix?
I think you can look at a mix. It depends on the capabilities that you have, how much of your focus is, for instance, on sheet-fed transactional, collateral, annual reports, and how much of your business might be in the digital print environment, and where you're working on not just quick turn, point of sale type solutions, but you're working on solutions that might build a sort of electronic database, a pick and pack environment where you're going to be doing continuity fulfillment long term. That's a longer sell.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on this topic, Howard?
Well, for the salesperson on a commission-only situation, they are not going to go out and push new technology. It hasn't sold. They're going to have to sell it. They're going to have to sell it harder. So things like 3D printing, variable data variable data is getting to be old hat now, but new technologies that are coming out are not going to be pushed because they have to actually go out and sell harder to convince the client that it is a viable situation that they should be looking at. And sales is driven by actual sales dollars, where marketing is driven by return on investment, hits off of a website or a given blog. And that's how marketing is, by and large, judged. If they're getting enough activity, if people are actually seeing the message they're putting out.
Well, and that's a pretty traditional view of that. Jim, I think you have some thoughts to add to that.
I would tend to disagree that that's the case. I think that effective organizations hold marketing to a return on investment standard, which you mentioned, I agree, but how do you calculate return on investment without sales? No sales, no ROI. And you have to be able to track where a lead came from, how they worked through the sales process, how they got to the sale itself, where that cash flow came from. And if marketing can't justify that cash flow, well, we spent $1 million and we got $2 million in sales. Okay, great. What part of that $1 million did anything? And I use a ridiculously high number like that because most of the people that we do business with every day have budgets in the $5,000, $10,000 range, not hundreds of thousands. I mean, you had HP.
I want $1
here.
million marketing budget. I would love to have one.
And I'd like a pony too while we're at it. But since neither are likely to happen
I'm
anytime
afraid
soon.
of ponies. Okay, let me ask you guys another question. Is marketing a silver bullet? Is that the answer to everything that ails the printing industry right now?
There is no silver bullet.
Huh.
The key is going to be to respond to what your customers' needs are in a timely and appropriate fashion. And what you're going to have to provide isn't just sheet-fed print or digital print or databases. You're going to have to allow your customer to get the right message to the right customer at the right time on the right device, and more importantly, with the right content. And it's going to be the appropriate content generation. And you're going to have to be thought leaders in that content arena. We've always relied on marketing agencies to be the leaders in thought content, which leaves us in the periphery of transactional items. So how are we going to step away from those transactional is to take control of that content, to take control of that data that's coming in, and to start two-way conversations with our customers.
Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I'd call it alignment. An organization has to be aligned with its customers, with their needs, with their changing marketplace challenges. And the best way to do that is to get out in front with those customers. And again, there is no silver bullet, but to stay in front of client needs and make that your focus is probably the most important thing that we can do. And that could be done in a number of different ways. I said earlier, I really believe in some customer focus and voice of the customer exercises. And that can keep you, I think, in a stronger relationship with your customer because you're listening. It also helps direct the investments that you make and the way that you perform.
Howard, is there such a thing as a silver bullet?
The magic elixir. The magician's show is on the other side of town where they're pulling rabbits out of hats. There is no magic elixir, no silver bullet. Printers will have to, as we've been, I think, saying, redefine who they are into communication companies, not just putting toner or ink on the paper, but actually taking the communication process and owning it, be it on paper, electronically, or even possibly getting into functions such as blog radio, for lack of other possibilities that a printer could envelope into. As a industry, we still have and control customers that are looking to communicate to their customers, and how we define ourselves is going to be how we define our customers can define who they are.
Mary Beth Smith?
I think
Mary Beth Smith?
Yes.
We actually have some questions from
We have
home.
a question?
Yes. Some people came on a little late and they were asking if the panel could, again, just say who they are. And especially,
we're getting ready to do that.
Okay, especially if they're on Twitter to give that information. And then also, the question is, what technologies do the panel like to use to track effective marketing?
Okay, well, why don't we introduce ourselves first, and then we'll also address that. Let's start with Howard. Tell us a little bit about you and your company, and if you have a Twitter account, please announce what your Twitter handle is so people can follow you.
I'm Howard Larson, Larson Associates. We are a lead generation target marketing company specializing in graphic and printing companies. Twitter account is Larson Associate, and been in graphics since, well, I grew up in graphics, been with my own company since 1975, originally as a typesetter, which, as we all know, disappeared back in the 90s in a matter of 2 years. So I know how industries can disappear.
Hi, I'm Tim Hendricks. I'm president of the Creative Cognition Group. We do sales and marketing optimization for printing companies. We look at ways to identify ways to make the sales organization more effective. We may do that through assessments, training and development. We'll take a look, as I mentioned earlier, on a focus and fit. Where do the reps spend the time? Howard said earlier, a lot of reps kind of stay away from technology. It makes it a little bit more complicated for them to get in front of a client. It's outside of the comfort level, but they have that need for education if we're going to continue to transform an organization to the changing needs of customers. From a marketing side, I really specialize in life stage marketing. A lot of my clients are in the direct mail industry, and we're looking at better ways to target consumers so we could reach them when they need you. And this creates more relevant offers and a better opportunity to create a stronger relationship. My Twitter is thendricksccg.
I'm James Michelson, the Chief Marketing Officer of VDP Web. We're a global software as a service provider for commercial printers and marketing agencies. So in terms of your next question, I'm going to be a little biased. We use VDP Web. I'll just answer that one now and then step out and recuse myself from answering that question.
Okay, I also want to let everyone know this is Jim's book, Cross Media Marketing 101. If you wonder where to get started and how to activate your cross media program, and you do need one, not only for yourself, but in order to be able to advise and help your customers with their cross media needs, you can find Jim's book online, Cross Media Marketing 101. Okay, now, Deborah, what was that last question? What technologies do you favor?
I think the question was, what technologies do you favor to track your marketing efforts?
Aha, that is it.
And of course, we use VDP Web.
I think we look at the different media solutions and based upon the best way to reach a customer. So if it's direct mail, you want to be able to have a way of tracking all the back-end responses. And you can use direct mail to drive people to telemarketing, to drive people online. The nice thing about direct mail is that it is trackable. You can take a look at the way that your lists, your package designs, and your offers all test out. Bring those back, take a look at what works with cement selects, and then identify maybe the best way to go back to market. Online, you can use tools like James Company or Google Analytics and put some type of measurement on the back end of who's visiting your site, pull in some of the demographics or the information about the organizations that are coming up on your site so that you can better interpolate ways that you can make modifications to reach other like consumers.
Specifically, I'm using Google Analytics and my phone. If my phone doesn't ring, I know I'm doing something wrong. I expect, on the average, we're a small company. We have less than 20 employees. And on the average, from our social media marketing, we're getting a minimum of 7 calls a week, which for a small company, we find that rather attractive.
Would you hand that back to Jim? Jim, Tim and Howard have both mentioned using Google Analytics, which is quite common. Could you tell us what the difference is between what VDP Web offers as opposed to Google Analytics, or do they work in tandem? Initiate us.
No pressure.
No pressure.
The thing to remember about Google Analytics is that's tracking web traffic and the referring source. Now, it's not specific to the customer. You know that you dropped a mail piece, you put a generic URL on there like www.mycompany.com, and you'll see a spike in traffic. Now, you're not going to be able to tell who came, where they got that from, and how they arrive. Now they have some that you can say, well, these came from naturalized search and this came from pay-per-click, and so you can assume that the rest was driven from your recent marketing activity, but there's no way to identify them individually. Part of cross-media marketing or cross-channel marketing is to take all of those contacts, whether it's direct mail or email or SMS text or a print ad or a QR code, no matter what that is, identify the individual, because if you're mailing to someone, we know who they are, right? So if I'm going to go ahead and print their name and address on a card, why not give them a personalized place to go? Or at very least, the opportunity to fill out a form and opt in. And I think what's the most important thing to do is to start at opt-ins and two-way conversations, and that's all going to be based on your content. Everything that we talk about, and I tend to be channel agnostic. As a CMO, my number one job is to get communication started with customers so I know where they are in the buying cycle. And I really don't care how they get there. Now, based on my customer base, I want it to be print. But what I try to do whenever possible for our customers is to use all of these other media, track who's there, and then use the web to drive print rather than print to drive web traffic. And we find that's a very effective strategy because the return on investment on someone who has come to your website, then you do a follow-up mail piece, is going to be 10, 15, or 20 times greater than if you went cold. It's like cherry picking an email list.
Good answer.
I want to comment on a point you made, Jim, because I think it's real important. Printers think like printers, and they really need to begin thinking like communication companies. It's our job to help educate them to try and create a more broad stroke solution. They have to create integrated solutions. They have to be looking at ways to enhance print with additional services. And I think that's one of the things that, I was talking with Howard earlier, that we try to get across so that they can think beyond the normal scope of their day-to-day, how am I going to fill the presses? Instead, how am I going to fulfill my client solutions?
Well, you know, that kind of leads into the next question that I had for you guys. How can printing companies achieve credibility as marketers?
I think it starts with branding. That branding can take place in the conversation that they have with their customers. Again, as I stated, you can't think of yourself as a printing company anymore. You have to think of yourself as a communications company, a company that provides media-based solutions. And I like that Jim said that he's media agnostic. That's kind of the way as consultants we have to think, because we have to help them evolve to get to that next level. Of course, they need to fill their iron. That's how they're going to, fill their payroll and build out their business. But in this marketplace, as competitive as it is, and with all the changing media options available to marketers, they have to evolve and they have to begin to see that they can create an integrated solution. A direct mail campaign with email gets a 27% lift in response over a direct mail campaign by itself, for instance. So that's something that can't be ignored.
Being biased, then you threw onto that campaign telemarketing and you really grab them. But as printers evolve into communication companies, rather than try to go it alone, the trend that I've seen be very successful for printers is to form a synergy of different companies, be it a advertising studio, a email marketing company, a marketing company, and form a key group of specialists so that you don't have to know everything about communications.
I think the most important thing that our audience can do to gain credibility as communications companies is to actually become a communications company. We're very good at going out and saying, we can do X and we can do Y, and I have this fancy piece of iron I just bought. Well, yeah, that's great, but where is the consistency of your own marketing efforts? If you're not going to put all of these whiz-bang technologies onto your daily efforts, if you're not going to send emails and personalized URLs and augmented reality and whatever else you want to do and sell to your customers, you need to do that. You need to do it consistently. You need to gather information on your customers and speak to them in a very personal one-to-one way. And what we do is we go out and we talk at 50,000 feet. HP is great at that, right? But where does that, when you finally put that printer down, nothing against our previous guest, when you finally put that printer in, how do I start generating revenue from it? And if our customers don't see us doing that, maybe it's the cobbler's children never have shoes, but you need to lead from the front, practice what you preach, and go ahead and market. I used to get 50 Christmas cards a year. And let's face it, most of our customers are printers and marketing agencies. If you're not sending Christmas cards, why is anybody else going to do it? And when you do that, why doesn't it have a QR code to something interactive on the web where you can track who measured it through? And even though it's a soft touch, it becomes a hard sales tool because you're able to take that piece of information and say, hey, John, remember when I came in and you went to that Christmas card and you had such a good chuckle? Wouldn't you like that technology for your customers?
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting. A few years ago, we decided to augment our beautiful print newsletter, which was really a small magazine, with a flash flip book. We converted it so that people could turn the pages online, and we added enhanced material. And it was fascinating. When I looked at the analytics, I had tons of hits on the electronic version, but people spent less than 8 seconds on a page. And on the other hand, we had phone calls about our print magazine. We got jobs from the print magazine because people were actually reading it and reading the material. But the novelty of the electronic was simply that, novelty. People looked at it and went, oh, that's cool, and then they flipped the page without actually absorbing the content. So as printers, we want to be credible and, as you say, agnostic, but that means we also don't throw out our printing either. We need to do all of it. We need to be marketing. That brings up the whole concept of MSP, becoming a marketing services provider, which is a term fraught with controversy and myth and legend. I tend to favor the term for many printers, if they're not actually going to be marketers, marketing support services. I'd like to hear you guys discuss how you see those two differ, or if you do. Marketing services provider as opposed to providing marketing support services. Do you think there's a difference?
There was a trend about 3-4 years ago where everyone who had a variable data printer decided they were going to become a marketing service provider without understanding how marketing and or services work. And what that meant to many people that they then went out and sold themselves as an agency without having done all these campaigns for themselves was that they really weren't doing that. What they were saying is that we have the capability to execute other people's plans and designs. So I like your idea of a marketing service support staff where, hey, you come up with what you want to do and we have the capability to produce it for you. Because internally, that expertise just isn't native to our industry and it really needs to be developed.
Some companies are making the move, some are not, some never will. But that doesn't mean they're not viable at some level of supplying support services to marketers or to agencies, in my opinion. But what are your thoughts, Tim?
Jim, I think you make a really good point. It's more than a name change. It's more than saying that we're Wallace Communications as compared with Wallace Print. You have to back it up and you have to be able to support it. And that's not just by having a Jetstream or a Zycon or an iGen. You have to have the intellect. And really the differentiator for most companies is the knowledge base that your personnel have. So if you're going to be a true marketing services provider, then you have to be knowledgeable about the way to do list selection and to do customer focus groups and be able to have an understanding of the marketplace and your product and the fit that has in it. Merely to say that, hey, we can do personalization and we can do direct mail and I can give you all these different options is not a service provider. That's a product provider. And so we have to up our game. If we're going to call on marketers, we have to be prepared to be able to discuss with them in marketing terms about the different types of campaigns that we can help them with. And we have to be prepared to talk strategy and talk creative and not just talk production. And most printers, if they do call themselves a communications or marketing service provider, still fall back on that comfort zone of being a production provider. So it takes more than a name change. It's going to take education. It's going to take raising the bar in terms of who we call on, how we communicate. But to your particular point, I do think whether it's a communications brand, a marketing solutions support company, or a marketing services provider, we have to arm ourselves with the tools to be able to achieve that level of dialogue with the marketplace.
And I believe those tools include staffing.
Yeah, I was talking about the fact that, we're only as good as the knowledge base of our personnel, not the equipment. And you can have equipment on the floor, but if you really don't know, one, how to use it, but two, how to create solutions with it, more importantly, then you're leaving your customers light and you're underselling the capabilities of your organization.
Absolutely. Howard.
To really achieve this, you might want to consider forming a sister company rather than transforming your existing printing company into a communications or marketing company. You might want to create a marketing company. It could be in the same location. It could be using some of the same staff, but it would give you an entirely different perspective and market focus, and staff it with some different marketing and sales people that have a different slant on communications, and you could be off to the races.
I want to add one other item to this. I think one of the things that all three of us have kind of missed is that it really comes down to generating content. What are we really selling as marketing service providers? It's not tools, like you said. It's not products. It's content. It's that messaging that becomes critical. So you really have to become content providers. And then the channels are almost irrelevant, right? It could go out in print. It could go out in email. It could go out by carrier pigeon. We really don't care. As long as we have the relevant content, and I think that's what we need to become if we're going to be service providers, and that's where we need to be comfortable.
I think it's interesting to hear all the perspectives and know that I've seen printing companies do any and all of these, or sometimes none of them. I know in our company, we have expanded our services. We've done it in a very intentional way. And we finally decided that we did have to break it out into business units, partly for credibility. It's a very difficult conversation to have with your printing customer. Oh, I can do your marketing too. They go, okay, but could you give me the price of 4,000 8.5 by 11 color copies? But one of the central things that we did, first of all, was make sure we had the proper expertise in-house. And as opposed to just looking at products to sell, we sell knowledge along with content. And the cornerstone of the knowledge we sell is helping customers create a valid marketing plan, something that they can execute, simple but elegant, one goal, 2 or 3 objectives, maybe 4 strategies for each objective, and then some tactics, so that they move through that, but so that they can execute it and feel like they own the process. So it's a training approach as well. So it involves creating content, giving people knowledge and tools, and helping them recognize sort of the basics of marketing. Who's your customer? Where are they? What do they want? How do you know? Do you ask them? Do you talk to them? So that they're connecting. But we do that because we've done it for ourselves. So we've developed not only through academics but through experience some knowledge and some credibility. Now, Tim, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, just kind of bringing together a number of things that were discussed here and something you just said. As a leadership of an organization, you have to create some balance. And to Howard's point about maybe creating another organization, a subsidiary, you're going to have reps that are going to sell print. And they are not going to be able to make that transition and be able to sell marketing services or a wider scope of solutions. But balance is a necessity because you still need to fill your iron. So if you were to set up an organization within your organization, designating individuals capable of making that transition is vital. And some people can't, and that's okay, because I still need to fill that iron in week 3 and week 4 of the given month. So if you look at what are your tools and how do I create maybe the best solution in human resources of utilizing my tools, you have to look at the knowledge base of the individuals, bring in some folks, and maybe retool some folks. But it does come back to somebody talking about print specs and somebody talking about social, email, and different types of solutions that complement print.
Well, let me throw this out for all of you, because we've all witnessed how different printing companies are approaching this. What do you see as the pitfalls they need to be prepared for when they're transitioning from strictly selling printing to becoming marketers or marketing support services providers, or however they choose to position themselves? What pitfalls are you seeing people encounter?
This is one we're very familiar with. It's the gross underestimation of the time and effort it takes to get involved in content creation. Right? There's only one way something comes out of a printer on a PDF. You get the design, you get the PDF, you put it out, and it comes out exactly the way you put it in. Now let's talk about email and talk about 25,000 different kinds of computers with 50,000 different kinds of processors and 25 email clients, and some people still in corporate computers using 8086s from 1985. And all of a sudden that becomes a very, very problematic endeavor. So when you take mobile and email and variable data and all of these different platforms, you really have to stop and consider, how am I going to manage that process? How am I going to support that? And the hours that it takes to do. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily difficult. It's just a different workflow. And they're like, $5,000 for a website, or a landing page, that's ridiculous. Well, how do you want it to work? And you want an application on, in an Apple. Well, that's only 12% of the market. Well, maybe 14, but they're rapidly falling. So what about the other 5 devices? I think when you get into this marketing service provider, you really need to reconsider your workflows and how much time it's going to take.
I think it also starts with education. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to have representatives who are going to be more print focused and some who can make the transition to being marketing services providers. But beyond the scope of that, most printer relationships are with purchasing, are with procurement. So we have to get into different parts of the organization. And today's print salespeople lack those relationships and lack the confidence level to make calls there, effective calls that create solutions that marketers can listen to. So again, beyond the branding and beyond the capabilities and the services we provide, can we communicate the message effectively? And I think that's where it starts. So education is a necessity. And that's something we have to begin to tool the sales force with.
So I hear Jim saying that one pitfall to be prepared for is the amount of time that needs to be invested in going through this cycle. I hear you saying that companies, you're saying educating sales reps. I might rephrase that a little bit and say learning how to tell your story in a credible way, whether that's through sales reps or through your marketing materials. But I certainly agree with that. Howard, what would you add?
Don't be afraid to charge enough.
Ah.
Printers
Excellent.
think in commodity terms, and these days in the commodity world, you will lose a job over 1/10 of a penny per page. If you're a communications company, you can't think in terms of per page costs. You're thinking in a communications content. You can't be afraid to charge what it costs. And that can be a hard thing to swallow when you're used to getting involved in a bid process.
I wouldn't mind our expanding on that in just a second, but I want to check with Deb Korn first and see if we have any other questions from the online audience.
I have a couple, actually. How do the panel feel MSPs handle promoting the earned media potential from interactive print pieces? is the first question.
Who would like to tackle that?
I think as an industry, we've done a very poor job of doing that. And because we deal with each of these technologies in a silo, and we don't really look at how they interact with one another. And it's very difficult to tell unless you start tracking and measuring and starting conversations what your real ROI is going to be on that. Any individual technology can be a great tool, but it's going to all come down to the content that you put in. You mentioned earlier, yeah, I had this new whiz-bang little flip book, and I got 8 seconds a page, and there was no retention of the content. So is your content being retained? Are you generating leads from that? And how are you tracking that? As long as that technology is providing you with a tracking mechanism that you can identify one-to-one, then you can easily justify the ROI. If you can't do that, then it's time to look at something else or how to implement that with that technology, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we can, you mentioned earlier, Mary Beth, it becomes a novelty. You know, a lot of times people are intrigued, but does it create response? And we run online sweepstakes programs, and we can identify that 30% of refer friends within a sweepstakes program actually come back into the site. Now, that's a great statistic, but are they buying? No, they're intrigued by the reference from a friend. And so we look at those kind of statistics, and I look at QR codes, and I spoke with one of the insurance providers, auto insurance providers I do business with, and they get great hits on the QR codes, but they don't get conversion. So how do we get these great interactive tools to actually create conversion? And I think that's something we need to look at, but I do think the involvement and interactive features that we have create involvement. The offer has to carry the day. Is it good enough? If the interactive involvement feature gets people to the offer and the offer's powerful, you've just got yourself past that 5-second interval of somebody throwing away a direct mail piece to actually interacting with it. You've upped your game. You've certainly increased your branding with that customer, so you have a better opportunity on multiple efforts. A lot of clients are doing first, second, and third effort campaigns, so the interactive component, albeit may be difficult to measure, may, and that's the key word, create better response.
Any form of marketing is good. In the old days, it used to be a customer would see 1 out of every 3 pieces you put out. And they would act after seeing 9 views of whatever message you were putting out, which meant basically you had to get in front of that client 27 times before they would buy. With the sheer inundation of content and knowledge that's coming via mail, internet, phone, salespeople dropping in, I have no idea what that number is now, but I'm sure it's more than 27 views or 27 exposures to your message, however that message goes out.
Well, we're about to run out of time. I wanted to give the people in our audience here at Print 13 a chance to ask any questions. Does anyone have a question for the panel? Could someone repeat the question?
The question was, how do we reach out to people that have come to our website if we've used print to drive them in? Well, there's two principal ways to do that. The first is, and I think the most effective, let's go with something generic. So you have a static print piece. If you have a static print piece, send them to a URL, right, that has the content specific to that print piece, that has an opt-in form that's easy to fill out. I want your email address, and that's it. And then give them an opportunity and a reason via content to opt into that. Does that make sense so far? Now, if you don't drive them there by print, they have to get there some way, right? Let's say we're using a QR code, or they use naturalized search, or they use a pay-per-click campaign. Make sure that all of those lead generation sources, and that's where your Google Analytics come in, where you can kind of tell where they're coming, and you tell Google that too. When those people come from those sources, give them relevant content to whatever they clicked on. So always use a landing page for that information, and then provide that same opt-in form. regardless of the source. Now, if it is a variable data print piece, then you could give them something that's highly personalized, a code, a URL just for them, and then they can have a pre-populated form, and you'll know that they got there whether or not they click anything. So they get to the page, they spend their 8 seconds, they flip on, whiz bang, that's kind of neat. Now I know who at least was interested to follow up with, and that's a warm lead list that you have to play around with.
One of the things that we've done when we've driven people online from a print ad or a newspaper insert is to create some type of involvement, like a survey. Once you create maybe a question set, you get these people a little bit engaged, and the question set is something that could be familiar to them, something that they're comfortable answering. And after they've done that survey, you can ask them to fill out the address and information and email address. You cross that permission marketing threshold. Now you have the opportunity to do some business with them. At the same time, and I referenced it earlier, you may also ask them, do they know of anybody else who might be interested in this? And you create a little bit of, as Howard will talk to, some social dialogue. And word of mouth is still among the best and most effective media opportunities that we have.
I have to ask, why does Google send postcards out to entice people to use AdWords? They're using print to sell online. At the same time, why does Vistaprint and OfficeMax use online to sell commodity printing? If there's a project and there's a need, it works.
It is an integrated world. I will say that I think it's vitally important, whatever medium you use to connect with your customers, you need to provide them an opportunity to come back to your website or to engage in some way. Even when we send "How was your experience?" surveys after we've completed a job, we always include additional information. Are you interested in any of these following projects coming up soon? And we'll list them and they can check them. Do you have friends or colleagues that could benefit from working with us? So we always give people an opportunity, whether it's in print or online, to reach back to us. So I think that's always going to be important. We have completely run out of time. I'm surprised they haven't come in and thrown us out yet. I would like to thank our panelists today, Jim Mickelson, Tim Hendricks, and Howard Larson. Please give them a hand. And I think that some of them may be available for you to ask questions to individually. Jim may have to be leaving to catch a plane. I'm not sure. But at any rate, we do appreciate you guys being here. And that's it. Thank you.
I just want to remind everyone, at noon we have a lunch and learn with Crawford Technologies. Everybody is welcome to stay, have some lunch, and find out about some customer communications revolutions.